The library ship Kosizd moved carefully towards the human space station, suspended over the beautiful blue and white marble of their world. The curator was practically climbing the walls in its excitement. What a glorious find! An unknown sentient spacefaring race. That's next year's grant application approved already. His second scribe fluttered in agreement. We have so much to teach them. They must be trembling with anticipation. First we must learn, then teach. But yes, no doubt it's a marvelous moment for them. The space station independent tracked the incoming ship, watching with apprehension as it approached. It continued to broadcast its good intentions in several languages. Captain Modest watched. Fuck! They had to turn up now. We searched the stars for years, and now we have 2 aliens turn up at once. At least they're not shooting this time. He turned to his second-in-command. Tell the engineers to stand down. The project is blown until we know what we're dealing with. Inform Earth and dig around my office for the first contact stuff. It's buried in there somewhere. Captain Modest waited outside the airlock for his new guests to arrive. He had brought his science officer and his engineering chief. He didn't have a Xeno officer yet. No one did. Now might be a good time to fix that. The second scribe entered the human vessel with a certain apprehension. They had traced the humans from the broadcast sphere surrounding the planet. They had a couple of centuries of low-quality audio and visual material to work from. Unfortunately, some of it was clearly fiction, while some of it she deeply hoped was fiction, but suspected wasn't. Her first priority was to establish communications and explain her mission. The human, identified as Captain, was tall, very tall. They were tailless, bipedal, warm-blooded omnivores. Not unknown, but it was unusual for them to achieve spaceflight independently. Her species had developed from flightless avians. She suspected that there weren't any similar creatures on the home planet of these people, at least not for long. She bowed, her crest raised in respect. Captain, we have some knowledge of your language from your broadcast sphere. I present you a device that can translate the common languages of the greater galaxy. It will permit you to translate the information we can provide. The captain returned the bow. If he had understood the strange, broken Mandarin, then this was one hell of a gift. His science officer went to take it, but the engineer grabbed it. I'll take that. I need to scan it before we attach it to anything important. A quick glance showed it had one switch, obviously an on-off setup. They must have done this before. He turned it on and nodded to the captain. Thank you for your gift. I welcome you to Earth and hope our relationship will be prosperous and peaceful. The translator sent out a series of high-pitched squeaks. Apparently it worked, since the visitor bowed again and replied. It is our privilege to welcome you and your people to the greater galaxy. Our mission is simply to spread knowledge. We seek to learn about humanity and help you rise to the stars. The box turned her warbles into English. Granted, it was the sort of English you might expect in a black-and-white newsreel from previous centuries. It was still better than her Mandarin. The second scribe had brought 2 other scholars with her. The first was the closest the Kosizd had to the human body type. Nearly as tall, with similar facial features. Unfortunately, it was an engineer, not truly a scholar, but it was standard practice to try and put the new species at ease. The second scholar was, unhappily, a poor choice. The compound eyes and 8 limbs of their cultural analysis scholar seemed to be causing a great deal of discomfort among the humans. The second scribe tried to introduce it, but the humans were obviously uncomfortable. Apologies, scholar. I must ask you to return on board. Something about you is causing a fight/flight reaction among the humans. I will endeavor to resolve it, but this is not the time. Second scribe, this is the very core of my profession. I must be present for the introduction of this new species. She bowed to her colleague. It is indeed a tragedy. I will record all our interactions for you. Now please withdraw. She quickly sent the disgruntled scholar back to the ship before it could become an issue, when everything seemed to be going so well. She would ask the captain about it privately. The captain heard the mixed warbles and squeaks between the guests, but the translator remained silent. Second scribe, does your gift not translate such language? My apologies, Captain. You may set it as you wish, but we designate a spokesman, in this case myself, as the user. It allows for a more orderly approach. It is quite capable of translating for a crowd if you wish. Our own devices are internal." The alien engineer was staring around, obviously wanting to ask questions. The captain decided that this might be a learning moment for everyone. "Perhaps your engineer scholar might enjoy a tour with our chief. We can continue our discussion in my office." The second scholar warbled her delight. This was the best kind of welcome. Some species held their technology to be a dark secret, never to be shared with strangers. It was a good sign if they were willing to be open about it. She turned to her engineer. "You are permitted a tour with the human engineer. Adjust your translator and please behave appropriately. I will rejoin you on the ship." The captain and the second scribe walked away, leaving the two engineers examining each other. The chief felt he needed to take the lead. This was his station. "My name is Brenner, Chief Engineer Brenner if we're being formal. May I ask if you have a name?" The alien touched his throat. "I am called Auric. I'm also Chief Engineer. Thank you for your welcome." His translator had inflected his English with a Scottish accent. Obviously, they had watched a lot of human entertainment on the way here. "Well, Auric, what would you like to see?" The alien looked around. "Everything?" While the captain and the second talked earnestly about the endless possibilities of joining the greater galaxy, a more important alliance was being forged. "These are our engines. They provide a bit of thrust when we need them. Otherwise, they just provide power to the station and recharge our spacecraft as necessary. Occasionally weapons if something heads our way, rocks or debris, for example." Auric peered at the control console. "All from here? We have separate systems for those functions. This is controlled by one person?" "Yes, of course. Power is power." Auric considered. Deep in the heart, or similar organ, of every engineer was a desire to improve, to create something better, to save on staff costs. He, like all engineers, dreamed of a bigger budget. For Auric, he saw some clever systems, underpowered and missing some vital parts, but integrated in a way that would transform his field. "Possibly I could see some more? Your life support, perhaps?" The two engineers went section by section through the station. Finally, an impatient second scribe called her engineer. "Are you lost? In some form of distress? I have been waiting for your return, as has the cultural analysis scholar. Return immediately." Auric had lost track of time, forgotten he was on a first contact mission. He and Chief Brenner had spent hours talking about the systems, the improvements Galaxy Tech had available, and his delight in human design. "Chief Brenner, perhaps you would enjoy a tour of my ship tomorrow." "I'm afraid I must report to the second scribe." The chief nodded. He too had nearly forgotten that this was an alien, newly discovered. "I would be delighted, Auric. See you in the morning. I must report to the captain. But before you leave, may I ask you something? I'm not sure I should tell you this, but we have encountered another alien species. It didn't end well. Perhaps you could identify them." He moved to a console and played the visuals. A craft arrived at speed into range and immediately began firing on the station. Plasma smashed into the Independent. "We received no transmissions, no warning. They just arrived and started shooting. Any idea who they were?" Auric watched. The attackers were flying an old Intech cruiser, obsolete for many generations. Still, far beyond human tech. "That ship is very old. Only pirates would use one. I assume they demanded ransom? They are thieves, mostly. They stay out here on the edge of civilization. No offense. How much did they steal?" Chief Brenner shifted his head from the screen, regarding his new friend. "Nothing. Remember I mentioned weapons and debris? We were worried that you were connected with them. Now that I know you are not, well, I figured you could help." Auric thought the translator had failed. "They demanded nothing? They left? Perhaps I misunderstood." Chief Brenner just grinned. "They weren't expecting us to shoot back. By the time it was over, they didn't want anything. Ever again. That's why your welcome wasn't as warm as perhaps it should have been." "Forgive me, you destroyed it? How is that possible? You're generations behind in technology compared to the Intech. Have you ever heard of a nuclear-pumped X-ray laser? Because they hadn't. We were collecting up the wreckage as you arrived." Auric understood the words, but even as an engineer, he couldn't figure out how they went together. Perhaps I better go see my second. I will meet you in the morning, Chief. Looking forward to it. The chief went straight to the captain's office. You were right, sir. They had nothing to do with the attack. I dropped a few hints about what happened. I left their engineer trying to figure it out. He's a good one. Told me a hell of a lot about their capabilities. Pure civilian. I get to see their ship in the morning. Well done, Chief. I practically bought Girl Scout cookies from the second scribe. I'm briefing Earth now. We will continue the welcome. Allow them access to everything. It makes no odds until we figure out how their stuff works. The second scribe reported to the curator. The captain was very helpful. He explained the current political structure, gave us access to the world database, with his apologies for some of the contents. Apparently it is uncensored. We have full access to the planet, and he has designated our shuttle as Xeno 1, should we wish to land anywhere. My records cannot find a more open and comprehensive welcome. The curator nodded. Yet you don't sound convinced. What's on your mind, Second? The second fluttered in frustration, her crest rising and falling. That's the problem. Who does that? Our own contact took nearly a generation before we opened our world, and we were careless. Have these humans no fear? Auric had been listening, waiting to report. They have reason. Before we arrived, they were attacked by an Intech privateer. It must have followed our trail and jumped ahead. I didn't tell them the full story of what usually happens to a world that falls to the Intech. They destroyed it. Then we interrupted them recovering the debris. Such a ship could destroy us with ease. They have the finest engineering skills I've ever seen. With the wreckage of that ship alone, they will be in the greater galaxy soon. They are not afraid because they never expect to lose. From what I can see, they're right. The curator sank back in its bath. Well, best ensure they join the community. We don't want them on the outside. You will prioritize engineering and design. Send them everything. Engineer Auric, you're now in charge of this contact. Send my regrets to the cultural analysis scholar. Tell me, did you discover why he was a problem? The second nodded. Yes, curator. Apparently they are afraid of spiders.